Imagine a 400-pound wrestler so huge and so fearless that he became friends with Al Capone, trained spies to fight Nazis, and stomped across wrestling rings like a human mountain. He wasn't just a fixture in the wrestling ring. He was a living spectacle, a human mountain whose size and presence made him impossible to ignore. Man Mountain Dean's story didn't stop at the squared circle. Dean's life reads like a pulp novel you might pick up in a dusty newsstand. Only remarkably, it's all true. Wrestling, organized crime, espionage, and real-world danger collided in the life of one man whose sheer size and audacity allowed him to navigate worlds most people could only dream of. From brawling in smoky wrestling halls to walking among gangsters and spies, he became a legend not just for his feats of strength, but for the surreal, almost cinematic arc of his life. By the time he stepped into the wrestling ring, audiences weren't just watching a match. They were witnessing a living myth. Man Mountain Dean wasn't simply performing. He was living the kinds of stories people thought only existed in fiction. And yet, for all the larger-than-life antics, the strange alliances, and the unbelievable escapades, Dean remained a man of his era. Part entertainer, part soldier, part giant, and all legend. Frank Levitt was born in Manhattan's Hell's Kitchen in the 1890s. Just blocks away from his childhood home stood the Broadway Theater, where his father worked as a stage manager, immersing Levitt early in a world of performance, timing, and controlled chaos. From an early age, Levitt's size set him apart. By his early teens, strangers regularly mistook him for a fully grown man, an assumption that followed him everywhere and quietly reshaped the course of his life. Well before World War I officially erupted, Levitt was determined to join the army, even if it meant bending the rules to do it. According to legend, he paid a homeless man to pose as his father and sign the necessary paperwork in person. Levitt's military career would stretch across 5 separate enlistments, yet the uniform wasn't the only arena in which he tested himself. In 1921, he briefly crossed into professional football, playing for the New York Brickley Giants, a team tied to the league that would soon be known as the NFL. Still, it wasn't football that ultimately captured Levitt's imagination. A new sport was beginning to seize the American public's attention, one that blended physical dominance with theatrical spectacle and promised far greater rewards for a man of his presence. Raised in the orbit of Broadway, Levitt immediately recognized the appeal. Professional wrestling offered everything he was built for: strength, drama, and an audience eager to believe in giants. Levitt initially entered the wrestling world as Soldier Levitt, a straightforward tribute to his years in uniform. However, he soon realized that a purely military identity wasn't enough to set him apart. Searching for something more colorful, he briefly adopted the nickname Hell's Kitchen Hillbilly, an attempt to inject regional flavor and mystery into his persona. The problem was obvious, though. Hell's Kitchen and hillbillies are entirely different cultural worlds, and the contradiction left fans puzzled rather than interested. His next reinvention was Stone Mountain, a reference to the massive granite landmark outside Atlanta, meant to convey immovability and scale. The name worked well enough domestically, but it fell flat overseas. When Levitt toured Germany in the 1920s, promoters complained that the reference meant nothing to local audiences. The solution was simplicity. Stripped of geography and confusion, Levitt became Man Mountain, a name that needed no translation and perfectly captured what crowds saw the moment he stepped into the ring. By the close of the 1920s, the toll of the ring had begun to catch up with Levitt. Years of punishing matches left him battered and injured, forcing him to step away from wrestling as a full-time occupation. Seeking stability, he relocated to Miami and took a position as a police officer, trading the chaos of the ring for the authority of a badge. The career shift was short-lived. In 1930, barely a year after he married his girlfriend Doris Dean, Levitt was dismissed from the force due to his well-known association with notorious mobster Al Capone. According to a report in the Miami Herald, Levitt was abruptly terminated for conduct unbecoming an officer after acknowledging that he had made multiple visits to Capone's residence on Palm Island. Levitt maintained that there was a clear line between personal association and criminal activity. Addressing the controversy in an interview with the Tallahassee Democrat, he tried to set the record straight. "We were friends, all right, but they said I was a Capone gangster." He consistently denied having any ties to organized crime or involvement in Capone's operations. Whatever the truth of the relationship, the fallout left Levitt with few options. With his reputation clouded and his law enforcement career over, he returned to what he knew best, the world of professional wrestling. Rebranding himself once again, Man Mountain adopted his wife's maiden name, becoming Man Mountain Dean, a change motivated as much by caution as by marketing. Dean carried a more Anglo-Saxon ring than Levitt, and his wife worried that wrestling in Nazi-controlled Germany could invite dangerous misunderstandings if authorities believed he was Jewish. The name change offered a layer of protection and a cleaner, more imposing identity. As Man Mountain Dean, he leaned fully into the persona that audiences craved. He emphasized his military past, cultivated a thick, biblical beard, and blended hard-edged New York toughness with an unexpected streak of Southern charm. Depending on the night, he could play either hero or villain with equal conviction. Sometimes the act went too far. He was once suspended from wrestling in California for, as officials put it, being such a mean cuss. The volatility only added to his appeal. Dean became a genuine main event attraction, reportedly wrestling an astonishing 6,783 matches over the course of his career. Among the most famous of these was his feud with Wild Bill Longson, the wrestler widely credited with inventing the pile driver. Dean outweighed Longson by nearly 100 pounds, and during one brutal encounter, whether by a stomp or by hurling him from the ring, he was said to have broken Longson's back. The storyline escalated into wrestling mythology. Longson, the narrative claimed, returned to Salt Lake City to recover, then resurfaced under a new identity, the Purple Shadow, concealed behind a plum-colored mask. When he finally challenged Man Mountain Dean again, the bout ended in dramatic reversal. Longson broke from the choreography, twisted Dean into a punishing hold, and snapped his left leg. Only then did he remove the mask, revealing himself at last, when the revenge was complete. Once again, the grind of wrestling began to take its toll on Dean, and his time in the ring gradually gave way to another long-held ambition. From childhood, he had been drawn to the world of performance, and now the film industry offered a new stage. His immense frame and instinct for spectacle translated naturally to the screen, allowing him to carve out a place in Hollywood and abroad. Dean's first notable break came in 1933 when he traveled to the United Kingdom to serve as Charles Lawton's stunt double in The Private Life of Henry VIII. It was a fitting entry point for a man whose career had always balanced physicality and theatrics. Over the next 20 years, Levitt would appear in dozens of films, often cast in roles that demanded sheer presence as much as acting ability. Then history intervened. In December 1941, Japan launched its attack on Pearl Harbor, pulling the United States into World War II, and redirecting the course of Man Mountain Dean's life once again. At the outset of World War II, U.S. military policy treated so-called enemy aliens as potential threats rather than assets. Immigrants from Germany, Japan, and Italy were barred from enlistment, their language skills and cultural familiarity viewed with suspicion. That position did not last. Commanders recognized that fluency in an enemy's language, and an intimate understanding of their customs, habits, and mindset, could be invaluable on the battlefield and beyond it. The solution was a dramatic pivot in strategy. To harness this expertise, the Army quietly established a covert military intelligence training center at Camp Ritchie tucked away in the rolling countryside of Maryland. There, a new kind of soldier would be prepared for the war, one trained not just to fight, but to interrogate, deceive, and outthink the enemy. Before these unconventional recruits could be deployed, particularly to the Western Front, they first needed to be prepared for the realities of combat. That preparation required instructors who understood violence up close, who could teach not just theory, but survival. One such instructor was, in equal measure, perfectly suited to the task, and almost laughably unexpected. When the United States formally entered World War II, Frank Leavitt left little doubt about his intentions. "I know what I have to do," he told a friend. Despite being in his early 50s, he re-enlisted without hesitation. Assigned to the clandestine training program at Camp Ritchie, Leavitt arrived with the rank of Master Sergeant and immediately stood out. His size alone made him a spectacle. Among the trainees, later known as the Ritchie Boys, were future cultural figures such as J.D. Salinger, men who would go on to shape American literature and memory of the war. To them, Leavitt was both curiosity and authority. Drawing on his military experience and his years of punishing physical work, he trained these recruits in hand-to-hand combat, preparing them for the brutal encounters that awaited them beyond the classroom. He also drew heavily on his background as a performer. Camp Ritchie's training program included a fabricated German village, complete with mock enemy tanks fashioned from cardboard, designed to immerse recruits in the psychological realities of the war. According to military historian Beverly Eddy, Leavitt was tasked with one of the camp's most unusual assignments, portraying Hermann Göring, the bombastic commander of the German Luftwaffe, during staged Hitler rallies. These simulations were intended to expose trainees to what Eddy described as the fanaticism of the Nazi Party, forcing them to confront the tone, spectacle, and intimidation tactics they would encounter overseas. Frank Leavitt, after the war, returned to civilian life. He settled back onto his estate outside Atlanta, far removed from wrestling rings, film sets, and wartime deception. On May 29, 1953, at the age of 62, he spent part of the day doing yard work around his home. Later, he sat down on the couch to listen to a baseball game on the radio. At some point, he mentioned that his chest hurt. Within minutes, Man Mountain Dean was gone, felled by a fatal heart attack, his extraordinary life ending not with spectacle, but in quiet stillness. Frank Leavitt, known to the world as Man Mountain Dean, lived a life that straddled the line between myth and reality. He was a towering wrestler who could dominate the ring, a performer who brought presence and drama to the silver screen, and a soldier who taught others how to fight and survive in a world at war. He moved seamlessly between worlds that, to most, seemed entirely separate. The spectacle of the arena, the glamour of Hollywood, and the deadly seriousness of military intelligence. Dean's story is a reminder that truth can be stranger than fiction. Wrestling, espionage, Hollywood, and history all collided in the life of a single man, creating a narrative as entertaining and improbable as any tale on the silver screen. Man Mountain Dean may have left the ring for good, but no one will ever forget the giant who fought Nazis, out-wrestled the world, and lived life larger than anyone could imagine.